This is Trepp with a special podcast, The Economic Impact of COVID-19 from the Ratings Agency Viewpoint. I'm Martha Kocher with Trepp, a data modeling and analytics firm for the CMBS commercial real estate and CLO markets. I'm with Manus Clancy, Senior Managing Director, and Joe McBride, Head of CRE Finance. And joining us today is Eric Thompson, Senior Managing Director at KBRA and Global Head of the Structured Finance Group. Eric, welcome.
Thank you for having me.
Would you mind giving us a quick overview of your background for those that don't know you well?
Well, I guess I've been doing structured finance for about 20 years. Most of that has been around CMBS. I led a CMBS surveillance effort at another rating agency for many years before coming to KBRA in 2011 to start up its CMBS effort there. And led the CMBS and then real estate units. And now I look after structured finance, which encompasses both real estate oriented securitizations such as CMBS and RMBS, as well as ABS and structured credit.
How would you say what you've seen so far, this pandemic and recession, compare to the great financial crisis?
The great financial crisis is not a great comparison, or not a good comparison. I say that because with the great financial crisis, we had financial excesses in the system that boiled over. They impacted many different product types. But of course, in the run up to it, credit deteriorated. In that crisis, it did take some time for delinquencies to rise. And, I guess they got into call it the low double digits. Unlike a financial market issue, the pandemic was sudden, unprecedented, and I don't think I'm saying anything that folks don't know, but it literally directly impacted the use of commercial real estate as opposed to potentially borrowers that were over levered and had tenancy issues, et cetera, and so forth. The fact of the matter is, as we all know, for weeks and months on end, you couldn't use a mall, you couldn't use a hotel. And as a result, we blew through GFC delinquency rates quite quickly. And while the delinquency rates have settled down some, and folks are over the shock and awe of just how quickly delinquency rates went up, that was the fastest rise in CMBS history. At the end of the day, we're just in the beginning innings of a long, slow road through working out what modifications or forbearances may not ultimately take hold.
It's interesting that you bring up the comparisons to the great financial crisis. We bring it up in our earlier podcast that people don't realize how long it took for peak delinquencies to take place. Right, Bear Stearns goes out of business in early 2008, Lehman later in 2008. You can call that kind of the peak headline risk of the great financial crisis, yet we didn't see delinquencies peak until 2012, I believe. Part of that was because people were slow to throw in the towel. Part of it was that the servicers could only take so many properties on to resolve at any one time. There was a slow buildup for that. This is a long-winded way of me saying that out of that crisis, we came out with several different changes to the market. Lower leverage, more skin in the game for borrowers. On the bank level, we saw the demand for stress testing. On the accounting side, we saw CECL. Any kind of new discipline you see coming out of this, or is this so far afield of what we've seen at any time during your career, or is this just something that you just can't predict what the responses are from investors, lenders, rating agencies, and so forth?
I think that ultimately there will be things that come out of this crisis. However, perhaps where I'm short-sighted is, I don't know how meaningful they may be, because ultimately I don't perhaps understand, how a normal functioning market will ultimately be able to incorporate pandemic risk. That's a shutdown for an entire, effectively, where the entire economy has been, extremely impacted. Of course, some segments more than others. What I do think is that CMBS, all things considered, at least in my view, from a rating perspective, I think that it has and will hold up better than it did during the great financial crisis. And I say that for a couple of different reasons. I think one of the first reasons is there have been, through the history of CMBS, there's been an evolution over the years. So, and some of those evolutions, and even in fact, the great financial crisis itself, they created what I would say is a more robust market. And that's on a number of measures. If you look at pre-crisis AAA and BBB minus credit enhancement levels, they were, call it 12-ish and low threes. They're now 20 and 7. So there's much more enhancement there. And not only is there more enhancement, there is lower leverage as a general matter. But besides there being lower leverage, it's also not effectively, there's just not as much pro forma, depending upon what your definition of that term is. I think that largely things have held, and it's been on in-place cash flows. Now, that said, I'm not saying that from a credit rating standpoint, there won't be downgrades. We'll effectuate more downgrades this year than we have in our entire history at KBRA over the past 10 years. The difference is that we're not going to be in a position where natural AAAs, or the 20% class, in my view, very few are going to be impacted by downgrades, in my view, very few AAs. There will be the speculative grade part of the stack and the BBB minus part of the stack. I expect them to be, have a more outside impact on ratings downgrades and losses. Some A's, unfortunately. But I think that, as a general matter, things are in a better position from, a credit enhancement standpoint and where the underlying loans were. What I'm saying, though, is somewhat predicated on vaccines and effective therapeutics that might be launched in the first half of the year and maybe get implemented. Maybe it's 9 months, and allow the economy to better recover. In saying that, I guess there might be perhaps, maybe that could label me as an optimist. But what I'm not saying is that, frankly, the days of non-needs-based retail and how that acts, they're permanently impaired. And where you're going to see significant downgrades, it is going to be on second-tier malls and tertiary markets. If you're the second or third mall in a tertiary or secondary market, I think that, I don't see how you can really avoid downgrades and, frankly, potential losses. I think that if the scenario that I stated plays out, I don't ascribe to necessarily a V recovery. And commercial real estate certainly lags the general economy in terms of performance. I think unemployment's going to be, it's going to be in the sevens. It's going to be, frankly, it could be double what we just had going into the pandemic. So commercial real estate's going to suffer. I think that a key difference is that if the events play out where there are therapeutics and treatments or vaccines, I think the economy gets on a footing potentially faster than it did on that low, slow climb since the Great Recession. So I don't know if that quite answers it. I know there's a lot of generalities in there that you might want to poke into.
One other thing that has been different this time that I'm sure you'll remember is from 2008 to 2010, we went through 21 months of no issuance.
Mm-hmm.
In this crisis, we saw issuance continue in May and June. Some of that was collateral pre-COVID that was being squeezed out of the system and being securitized. So that would have already been baked. But we have seen some lending post-COVID, particularly in industrial, office, and multifamily, a touch of retail, and really no hotels. Have you seen any meaningful changes in either the structures of the deals being done, the leverage at the loan level, or individual loan or lease terms of the deals that you've rated over the last 3 or 4 months?
We rated about 7 conduits, and I could be off 1 or 2 going into the pandemic, and maybe another 6 or 7 coming out of the pandemic. So right up to August, we were trying to stay hyper-focused on, well, gee whiz, what's different, what's going on. But the fact of the matter is, if we look up to that September point, deal sizes shrank, non-needs-based retail and lodging was minimal. In fact, the lodging that was included in the deals, none of it was post-COVID originations. Out of those 6 or 7 deals, say there was 250 loans. I'm giving you rough figures. There was only about 61 that were post-COVID originations. Of the post-COVID originations, and I'm talking about CMBS, not agency. Agency, by far, there was reserves. We saw non-core multifamily, ALIL, et cetera. Those numbers decline. But in the CMBS, the good news was that about of those 61 loans, if we broke down their balances, about 41% had debt service reserves, which we viewed as a positive that can help ride through the short term. And on the couple of deals that we rated coming into September, those reserve numbers actually went up. They were in the mid-60s. Now, how long that holds, I'm not quite sure, from the standpoint that some of the, what we call preliminary engagements in rating agency speak, where an issuer might show us a deal, we provide preliminary feedback, and they either engage us to final or we don't. Many times those loans aren't closed. So I don't know how ultimately what will happen to the pools, but we're starting to see the level of reserves already decline. Now, that could be a function of certain property types, what the lease structures are, and things of that nature. But in any event, coming into early September, we did see ample reserves. I think the other thing that was quite interesting, though, was we actually saw, if we isolated out what you might hear called shadow-rated loans, in market speak, not our speak, but loans that had credit characteristics that were consistent with an investment grade rating, if they were rated on a standalone basis. If we normalized for those loans and pulled them out of the pool, we actually saw leverage go up a couple points. I'm talking about, so your headline leverage figure might have been lower, but there was still an influence of barbelling. Interestingly, though, we saw the full term IO percentage go down, and more partial term IOs, perhaps because folks were trying to structure through an event, whether that be a lease roll or something of that nature.
So when you talk about leverage going up, was that more because the pool was tilted towards things that are really kind of on fire right now, like industrial properties, which people are very bullish about right now, or other property types that seem immune to the pandemic, maybe grocery anchored or Walmart/Target anchored type properties? Is that kind of like property-based bias, would you say, or is it something else?
So here's where I don't have an answer for you. I guess there's a couple of things going on. Yes, there were industrial, and I would say even some self-storage that had some higher leverage points. But when you start to peel back the onion underneath that, there's just a myriad of factors in these pools. We've been trying to more even look at appraisals, and where are appraisals coming out? What do the appraisals look like? How are they qualifying their opinion? So we don't know. Yes, a little bit of it might be industrial, and again, things like self-storage that might have had a higher leverage point, maybe even multifamily, Manus. But on the flip side, there's also in the mix with the other property types, how did appraisal LTV play into it and things of that nature?
So Eric, let me jump in here. You guys are having a very nicely nerdy conversation here, which is very much in line with the Trepp podcast, as we are a bunch of nerds here. But let me ask you, Eric, you're in Staten Island, is that right?
Yes, that's what I'm saying now.
We do this with every guest, and being as you're in, an island nation called Staten Island, we'd love to hear what the vibe is out by you. You are New York City, but you are more of a suburb. So what's it like on the street out there?
Look, I think that even though this is somewhat like a suburb, it's one of the 5 boroughs of New York City. What I have noticed, I can't go back to my office until January. But what I've noticed on my daily runs in the morning is that if like traffic post-August has really picked up.
Yeah.
And most of that traffic is heading toward the city.
Right.
A lot of folks in this borough work in Manhattan. On the other hand, what I would say is that, stores, they're not as full, they're not as populated. And of course, this borough has its restaurants just like all the others, and folks are outside. I don't know how long they'll be able to be outside, but it's been a little surreal.
So what do you miss most as a native New Yorker? Is it, going to Jets and Giants games? Is it going to the corner bar to watch, a
Jets or Giants game?
The Jets or Giants. Nobody's looking forward to that these days. Is it going to a concert? Is it
Manus is naming all the things he misses.
His bucket
right
list.
now.
That's his bucket list.
Yeah. What is it, Eric, about the pandemic that you're missing the most over the last 6 months?
My family and I, my wife and I, we like to go into the city. We like to get like anybody else, we like taking advantage of the shows. We like going out to dinner. And I think that the simple things, like call them simple things. I never thought I'd miss them so much, because they were just part of life, so there's the whole like social component as well that doesn't even have to do with New York. In the summers, I like to have a big pig roast, and I have a very small plot of land here in Staten Island, but I'll have 90 people on it, but I couldn't have my pig roast. I think that would have got shut down by the authorities, frankly. It's that lack of getting together. And usually if we did avail ourselves of things in the city, it was with people, it was social. That's what I miss.
I want to get on the distribution list for the next pig roast. I'm a big pig roast fan. So
We'll do a remote recording from the pig roast.
but once the COVID's done, I would definitely enjoy a big pig roast. Maybe we'd have a KBRA pig roast and do it, just blow it out. Since you missed this year, we'll make it even bigger and do it on the South Street Seaport or something like that.
So
I miss going to your office and having your founder kind of pop in and out of our meetings, have a donut or a bagel with us, hang out, tell us his most recent story. That was always fun when we came to visit Kroll.
well, the work part, yeah, I miss being at the office. This has been incredibly hard because I'm the type of person, I like to walk around the floor.
Yep.
I like to interact with analysts. I like in credit committees to be able to look people in the eye, not over Zoom or Teams. That's a whole other dimension of things, but
Who knew that we would ever be saying, I miss the office?
Yeah,
Yeah.
right.
So let's talk about the forbearance topic just for a moment. We've talked about this many times in our podcast, how forbearances work. Sometimes the term is thrown around loosely. It's meant to imply a timeout in debt service payments, but in this environment, more often than not, it means a tapping of reserves to keep a loan current and so forth. So there's different definitions. But with what we're seeing now as a data firm, it makes the data and what's happening with the loans a little bit more opaque. That you'll see a loan go 30, 60, 90, then go current. You'll have to go into the watch list notes to get a sense of, is this current because of a cure or is it current because of a forbearance, a tapping of the reserves? How does that make your job more challenging? Do you find the same opacity that we see in the market, that it's sometimes not easy to figure out precisely what's happening with a loan? And, what challenges does that bring for you?
in good times, Manus, I think with CMBS and the CRE IRP, we have the best reporting out of any structured finance asset class that I'm aware of. I wholeheartedly believe and agree with that statement. Forbearances, even though we went through GFC, the suddenness and the volume spike made this particular crisis challenging, and it still is. We literally had to redouble our efforts to recode reports to go through keywords and watch listed relief, like all these kind of terms, so that our rating, we have a CMBS rating unit and a CMBS subscription surveillance service so that we could use that. That has certainly been more challenging. And it's been more challenging because, clearly borrowers are understandably going to ask for relief in this environment. But if they are asking for relief, well, compared to one that's not, that's something that's a fact pattern that has to be considered. And, the ultimate clarity into what's going on, it isn't there. And when you don't have information, you have to make assumptions. And the assumptions that are being made in this environment, they could be a little bit more challenging because regardless of what services might tell you rent and occupancies are, we all know they're going to decline for at least a year. Even if my vaccine therapeutic scenario comes out, we lag the general economy. It's going to be through next year that you're going to see rents and occupancy decline. So we're having to make some of the best educated guesses we have. That's the part that's tough. But when these situations arise, putting aside the forbearance, there's a lot of concern about confidentiality, about workout processes, not impairing them to the detriment of investors and realizing the highest net present value for the trust. So at the end of the day, it's an additional challenge over one that was already there with defaulted assets. But yes, it's been more taxing.
I mean, I agree with you 100%. I think that the market is incredibly transparent, the CMBS market. I think that people have really sleeved over the IRP from the rating agencies, from the issuers, from the investors for 2 decades to make this really a best of breed standard. And I think that, any criticisms of it are really, really on the margin. So whatever I say about the forbearances has more to do with the rapidly changing landscape and more than to do with the design of it in the first place. But one of the side subjects has been, the borrower experience, working to get the forbearances, an unfamiliarity with it, what the master servicer can do, what the special servicer can do, and so forth. Do you think that this crisis leads to any longer term changes in terms of REMIC rules, in terms of people looking back on this and saying, we really should give the master servicer or the special servicer more latitude to do longer forbearances and so forth? Or is that just way too soon to kind of tackle that problem as we're kind of right in the midst of it?
I think it is too soon. But on the other hand, like, this isn't a new topic in regard to modifications and REMICs. And at various points, that I could recall during my career, it would always be surfaced of, well, will there eventually be a change? And, I think that even early out, the REMIC was, some of its limitations have been recognized. That's why there was facets in 1998, 1999. And, some people looked at CRE CDOs being the vehicle. But ultimately, I think there could be introspection that results in changes. I just think it's pretty early yet. And I also think that, per my comment earlier, which I have a concern about that maybe goes beyond like a rating agency and things of that nature. I just think that there's a lot more negative headlines that are going to come out of this as these delinquencies, the shock and awe of the delinquency rate's over, the workouts are starting, the forbearances, the foreclosures, the deed in lieu, the loan sales. And that's where things get a lot more messy. So we're going to see a lot more headlines, and there's still just a tremendous amount to work through.
So Eric, when you guys are, obviously when you're rating new deals, you have models by property type and by geography and by all sorts of granular aspects of each loan and each property. What are your kind of larger bullet point thoughts on how those models change going forward, or how they've changed already? I mean, I think that I hate asking a question and then answering it, but that's what I'm going to do. I know, right? I think you already mentioned it before, right? Like kind of non-needs-based retail is going the way of the dodo bird, slowly but surely. And that was already happening pre-pandemic. But like, are there other areas, in your models that you guys are changing now or thinking about changing in the future that, are going to be, true even after a vaccine and everything else?
I think the short answer is we haven't changed anything yet. But to qualify that answer a little bit, one of the advantages that KBRA had was coming out of the financial crisis, we had a blank slate, and we really got to get a hard look at the data. What we calibrated to was an A being a great recession stress. And the stress, of course, increases. You go up to AAA, it decreases as you go down the scale. And we have idealized default rates and things of that nature. Per my earlier comment, right now, and again, you could disagree with, was the GFC A? Some people might think it's BBB and have higher level, but at the end of the day, that's our approach. Given my comment before, I think it's working. I think that our AA's and AAA's are going to be sticky. I think many A's are going to be sticky, although there are A's that will take lumps, particularly those where you might have a conduit that has 50% mall exposure or 40-some-odd% mall exposure. When we change a model, that's a methodological change. And what we try to do is make our methodology resilient and flexible enough that it provides us some latitude in the assumptions we use so that we can accommodate a stressed environment and still assign ratings that we believe will hold up and not need an immediate qualification or downgrade. So what I can say is that the deals that we've rated post-pandemic as a general matter, using our existing methodology and taking more onerous assumptions for primarily vacancy factor, in some cases adjusting our stressed cap rates, it's made our average haircuts to issuer cash flows go up about 300 or so basis points. So we have double-digit haircuts to issuer NCF that's already haircut. Our stress capitalization regime typically already produced value varies to appraisal of, call it 35 to 40%. And that's continued. They're in the low 40s. So by virtue of doing that, of course, that's also impacted enhancement levels. So for now, the answer is we haven't changed our methodology, but we are working within it to address the environment we're rating in. Again, per my other comments, you always try to learn from things. We try to learn from ordinary ongoing surveillance. We're going to have a hard look back at this and, as things evolve, and could there be changes? Yes. But at this point, it's a little bit early for us to tell.
With that, we'll close this special podcast. Thank you to our guest, Eric. Thanks to our producer, Keegan St. Ange, may join us later this week as we look at what's happened during the week and how it may be impacting you. If you have a question, send us an email at podcast@trepp.com. Until then, visit trepp.com for more info and subscribe to the podcast with your favorite provider. Thank you for listening and stay well.
All right.